My entire world just shifted on its axis, and I'm sitting here trying to convince myself this is actually real and not some stress-induced hallucination. 30 seconds ago, everything I thought I knew about my life, my feelings, and my closest friendship completely shattered and rebuilt itself into something I never saw coming. If you're ready for this emotional tale of unexpected love and taking chances, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to Valentina's Stories for more touching stories that show us how life brings the right people together at just the right moment. Let me back up and explain how I got here, because this story doesn't make any sense without the context. 3 years ago, I walked into this massive office building on my first day of work, fresh out of college, terrified out of my mind, and completely convinced I was going to mess everything up. The company had this week-long training program for all the new hires, and on day one, they sat us in this cold conference room with about 20 other people who looked just as scared as I felt. The trainer started talking about the database system we'd be using, and I swear, within 5 minutes, my brain just shut off. Nothing made sense. The spreadsheets looked like alien language. The formulas might as well have been written in code. I was scribbling notes frantically, trying to keep up, but I had no idea what any of it meant. During the first break, I stepped out into the hallway to get some air and maybe have a minor panic attack in private. That's when I saw her. Rachel was leaning against the wall, staring at her notebook with this look of pure confusion on her face. She had her hair tied up in a messy bun, and she was wearing this professional blazer that looked brand new, like she'd bought it specifically for this job. She looked up at me and said, "Please tell me you understood literally anything that just happened in there." I laughed, probably too loud, and told her I was pretty sure I'd retained exactly 0 information. She grinned and said, "Okay, good. I thought I was the only idiot here." That was it. That was the moment we became friends. We spent the rest of that training week sitting together, sharing confused looks whenever the trainer said something incomprehensible, and meeting up after sessions to try to figure out what we were supposed to be learning. By Friday, we'd formed this little alliance. We promised each other that once we actually started our real jobs, we'd help each other out whenever things got confusing. And honestly, that promise is basically what got me through the first 6 months at this company. Our desks ended up being pretty close to each other, which was lucky. Whenever I had a question about something work-related, I'd roll my chair over to her desk and ask. She'd do the same with me. It became this routine. Pretty soon, we were getting coffee together every morning before work started. Then we started taking our lunch breaks at the same time. Then we started staying late together when we had big projects due. Without really planning it, we just became each other's work person. You know how some people have a work wife or work husband? That was us, except we joked about it all the time because we thought it was funny. Rachel has this personality that's hard to describe. She's incredibly organized, like borderline obsessed with color-coded planners and perfectly arranged folders. But she's also spontaneous and funny in a way that catches you off guard. She'll be in the middle of explaining some serious work thing, and then she'll make this random joke that has nothing to do with anything, and you can't help but laugh. I'm kind of the opposite. I'm disorganized, my desk is always a mess, and I can barely keep track of my own schedule. But somehow we balance each other out. She keeps me on track, and I keep her from taking everything too seriously. Over the past 3 years, we've been through a lot together at this job. There was the time we had to work an entire weekend to finish the Henderson account because our manager gave us an impossible deadline. Rachel was so stressed she almost quit, but I talked her through it and we pulled it off. There was another time when I completely bombed a presentation in front of some important clients, and I was convinced I was going to get fired. Rachel found me hiding in the break room afterward and told me everyone messes up sometimes, and that one bad presentation didn't define my whole career. She brought me my favorite sandwich from the deli across the street without me even asking. Little things like that happened all the time. She'd remember how I liked my coffee. I'd remember she hated the fluorescent lights in the main office and preferred working in the smaller conference rooms. We just got each other. Outside of work, we hung out too. Not all the time, but enough that I considered her one of my actual friends, not just a work friend. We'd grab dinner sometimes after particularly brutal days. We'd text each other about dumb stuff we saw on the internet. When one of us had a bad date or a rough week, we'd vent to each other. It was easy and comfortable, and I never really thought too deeply about it because why would I? She was my friend. My really good friend. That's all it was. Except now I'm wondering if I was completely blind this whole time. Because looking back, there were signs. Little things I didn't pay attention to. Like the way she'd always laugh at my jokes. Even the ones that weren't funny. Or how she'd find excuses to stop by my desk even when she didn't really need anything. Or the fact that she knew my schedule better than I did and would remind me about meetings I'd forgotten. Or how she'd touch my arm when she was talking to me. Just this light touch that I never thought twice about. Or the way she'd look at me sometimes during boring meetings. With this expression I couldn't quite read, but that made me feel like we were in on some secret together. I never questioned any of it because in my mind, that's just how close friends act. And I guess I was scared to question it too, because questioning it would mean admitting that maybe there was something more there, and I couldn't handle that thought. Rachel was too important to me. She was the one stable, good thing about this job and honestly about my life in general. The idea of messing that up by developing feelings or making things weird was terrifying. So I just didn't go there. I made jokes instead. I kept everything light and friendly and safe. Today started like any other Thursday. I was getting ready to leave the office around 6 in the evening when Rachel messaged me asking if I could stay late to help her with the big client presentation we had scheduled for tomorrow morning. I didn't even hesitate. I told her of course, packed up my stuff, and headed to the conference room where she was already set up with her laptop and a huge stack of papers. When I walked in, she looked exhausted. Her eyes had that tired look people get when they've been staring at screens for too long. She gave me this grateful smile and said, "Thank you for staying. I know it's late." I told her it was no problem, that we were a team, and that there was no way I'd let her handle this alone. We dove into the presentation, reviewing slides, checking data, making sure everything was perfect for tomorrow. 2 hours passed in what felt like both forever and no time at all. The conference room was a disaster zone. We had papers spread across the entire table, Post-it notes stuck to the walls with random reminders and corrections, and about 4 empty coffee cups scattered around. My eyes were starting to hurt from staring at the laptop screen for so long, and I could tell Rachel was reaching her limit too. She kept rubbing her temples and sighing, which she only does when she's really frustrated. She was clicking through the presentation file for what felt like the 100th time, squinting at the screen. "I swear we're missing a slide," she said, her voice tight with stress. "The section about quarterly projections. It was here earlier." I know it was. I leaned back in my chair and stretched. "We're not missing anything. You're probably just looking at the wrong version of the file. Didn't you save like 5 different copies?" Rachel clicked through her folders, opening and closing files rapidly. "I saved them with different names so I wouldn't get confused, but now I can't remember which one is the final version." She let out a frustrated groan and slumped back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. "This is impossible. We should just ask IT to help us recover it tomorrow morning." "Come on," I said, trying to sound encouraging even though I was just as tired as she was. "We're smart people. We can figure this out. We've solved bigger problems than this." She turned to look at me with this exhausted expression. "Can we, though? Can we really? Because right now my brain feels like it's been replaced with static." I understood exactly what she meant. My own thoughts were starting to blur together, and I was pretty sure if someone asked me to do basic math at that moment, I'd fail spectacularly. We sat there in silence for a few seconds, both of us too tired to think clearly. The office around us was completely empty. Everyone else had gone home hours ago. It was just us, the horrible fluorescent lights, and this stupid presentation that refused to cooperate. That's when it happened. I don't even know why I said it. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was some part of my brain that had stopped filtering my thoughts. But I looked at Rachel, surrounded by all this chaos we'd created trying to get this presentation perfect, and the words just came out. "You know what? Forget the presentation. Just marry me instead. At least then we'd have someone legally obligated to help us with this corporate nightmare for the rest of our lives." I was laughing as I said it. The whole thing struck me as hilarious in that delirious way things are funny when you're overtired. I thought it was such a random, absurd joke. Classic us. making light of a stressful situation with ridiculous comments. I was already turning back to my laptop, ready to dive back into finding that missing slide, not even really thinking about what I just said because it was just another throwaway comment in a friendship built on throwaway comments. But Rachel didn't laugh. I noticed after a few seconds that she hadn't responded at all, which was weird because she always had a comeback. Always. I looked up from my screen, and that's when I saw her face. She was staring at me with this expression I'd never seen before. Her eyes were wide, and there was something in them that I couldn't identify. Shock, maybe, or surprise, but also something deeper, something more intense that made my stomach suddenly feel strange. "Rachel," I said, and my voice came out uncertain. "You okay? Did you drink too much coffee? Should I call someone?" The silence stretched out, felt heavy, like the air in the room had changed somehow. Rachel was still staring at me, and now I noticed her eyes were getting shiny, like she was about to cry. That sent a spike of panic through me because Rachel never cried. I'd seen her handle awful work situations, demanding clients, unfair criticism from managers, and she never broke down. She was the strong one. Seeing her look like she was about to cry made me feel like something was seriously wrong. "I thought you'd never ask me," she finally said, and her voice was quiet and shaky in a way I'd never heard before. For a second, my brain didn't process the words. They didn't make sense. I stared at her, trying to understand what she meant, but it was like she was speaking a different language. "What?" I managed to say, and the word came out confused and strange. Rachel's eyes were definitely watery now. A tear actually rolled down her cheek, and she wiped it away quickly, but more followed. "I thought you'd never ask me," she repeated, and this time her voice was even softer. "I've been waiting for you to say something for like 2 years. My entire body went cold, then hot, then I couldn't feel anything at all. I was frozen in my chair, my hands still on my laptop, my brain trying desperately to catch up with what was happening. 2 years? Say something? What was she talking about? I'd made a joke. A stupid, random joke about marriage because we were tired and frustrated, and that's what we do. We make jokes. That's our whole thing. "Wait. Hold on," I said, talking too fast. "I was joking. That was a joke about the marriage thing. That was just me being stupid because we're both exhausted and this presentation is driving us crazy." She let out this laugh, but it wasn't her normal laugh. It was wet and broken, and it made my chest hurt. "Yeah, I know. You're always joking. That's kind of been the problem." "The problem?" I repeated. Nothing made sense. I felt like I'd walked into a conversation that was already happening, like I'd missed the first half of something important. "I don't understand what's happening right now." Rachel took a deep breath and set down the pen she'd been holding. Her hands were shaking slightly. She looked at me with those tear-filled eyes, and I saw something in her expression that made my heart start beating way too fast. "Okay, I'm just going to say this because apparently you're completely blind and I can't keep pretending anymore." The room felt too small suddenly, too quiet. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning, the distant sound of traffic outside, my own breathing. "Say what?" I asked, even though part of me didn't want to know because once she said it, whatever it was, everything would change. "I'm in love with you," Rachel said, just like that. No build-up, no warning. Just those words dropped into the space between us like a bomb. "I have been for 2 years. Since that weekend we worked on the Henderson account and you stayed late with me even though you had your own deadlines. Since you talked me down when I was so stressed I wanted to quit. Since you've been the only person in this entire company who actually sees me as a real person and not just another employee." Couldn't breathe. Literally could not make my lungs work properly. Rachel was still talking, tears streaming down her face now, and I was sitting there frozen. "I kept waiting," she continued, her voice cracking. "I kept thinking maybe one day you'd realize it too. That you'd see that we're not just friends. That we're perfect for each other. That we already act like we're together except for the actual being together part. I kept making jokes and laughing it off and acting like everything was fine because I was terrified of losing you. And you just kept being you. Being this amazing friend who brings me soup when I'm sick and remembers my favorite coffee order and stays late to help me with presentations. You kept making these jokes about us being work spouses or getting married when we're old and desperate, and every single time you said it, it felt like a knife because you meant it as a joke, but I wanted it to be real. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. My throat felt tight, like I'd forgotten how to form words. Rachel was crying harder now, and I'd never felt more helpless in my entire life. So when you just asked me to marry you, she continued, her voice breaking, even though you were joking, even though we're surrounded by this mess and you're exhausted and clearly just being your usual ridiculous self, something in me just snapped. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep pretending that my heart doesn't literally race every time you smile at me. I couldn't keep acting like I don't think about you all the time, like I don't look forward to coming to work just because I know I'll see you. She stood up abruptly, pushing her chair back so hard it rolled into the wall. She started pacing, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold herself together.
I'm sorry.
I know this is probably freaking you out. I know I just dropped a bomb on our entire friendship. But I can't take it back now. It's out there. My brain was working overtime, processing everything she'd said, and suddenly I was seeing our entire friendship through a completely different lens. All those little moments I'd brushed off as just normal friend stuff were replaying in my head. But now they looked different. The way she'd bring me lunch when I was too busy to leave my desk. The way she'd text me good night even on days we hadn't worked together. The way she'd defended me in meetings when other people questioned my ideas. The way she'd remember tiny details about my life that I'd mentioned once in passing. How had I missed this? How had I been so completely blind? And then another thought hit me, one that made my stomach drop. All those times I'd complained to her about bad dates. All those times I joked about being single forever. All those times I'd casually mentioned other women I thought were attractive. She'd sat there and listened and smiled and acted supportive. And the whole time she'd been in love with me. The whole time I'd been hurting her without even knowing it. Rachel, I finally managed to say, but my voice came out rough and unsteady. She stopped pacing and looked at me, her face red and blotchy from crying. It's okay, she said quickly, holding up her hands like she was trying to protect herself. If you don't feel the same way, it's okay. We can just forget this happened. I can transfer to a different department. Or maybe I can find a new job. We don't have to make this weird. No, I said louder than I meant to. I stood up too, my legs shaky. Don't. Just give me a second to think. But thinking was impossible because my mind was racing in 1,000 different directions at once. I was remembering the time 6 months ago when Rachel went on a date with some guy from the marketing department. I felt strange about it, uncomfortable in a way I couldn't explain. I told myself I was just being protective, that I didn't want her dating someone who might not treat her right. But when she'd come back to work the next day and told me the date had been terrible and she wasn't seeing him again, I'd felt relieved. Really, genuinely relieved. I was remembering all the times I'd turned down plans with other friends because Rachel had asked if I wanted to grab dinner after work. I'd always chosen her without even thinking about it, like it was the most obvious decision in the world. I was remembering last month when she'd been sick with the flu and I'd gone to her apartment after work with medicine and soup, even though I had a huge project deadline. I'd spent 3 hours there making sure she was okay, and when I'd finally left, I'd felt worried about her all night. I was remembering the weird, uncomfortable feeling I got whenever she mentioned going on dates or when that guy from accounting kept asking her out. I told myself it was just normal friend concern, but now I was realizing it felt a lot like jealousy. Oh no. Oh no. 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 I think I'm an idiot, I said out loud, and Rachel looked at me with confusion and fear written all over her face. What? I ran my hands through my hair, feeling like my head might explode. I think I've been in love with you too, and I just didn't let myself see it. Rachel's eyes went wide. What did you just say? Every relationship I've tried to have in the past 3 years has failed, I said, the words tumbling out fast. And I always told myself it was bad timing or we weren't compatible or whatever. But the real reason was that I kept comparing everyone to you. Nobody made me laugh like you do. Nobody understood me like you do. Nobody felt like home the way you do. I took a step toward her, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. You're the first person I want to talk to when something good happens. You're the person I think about when I'm having a bad day because I know you'll make it better. You're the person I want to spend time with more than anyone else in the world. Rachel was frozen, tears still streaming down her face, but now she looked hopeful instead of devastated. I was so scared of losing you, I continued, feeling my own eyes start to burn with tears. You're the most important person in my life, and I think some part of me knew that if I admitted how I really felt, everything would be different. And different is scary. So I just kept making jokes and keeping everything light and safe, because that way I wouldn't have to risk losing you. You're not going to lose me, Rachel whispered. I know that now, I said, because you just told me you've been in love with me for 2 years and you didn't run away. You stayed. She let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Of course I stayed. Where else would I go? I closed the distance between us in 2 steps. Rachel looked up at me, and for the first time since this whole conversation started, I saw something other than fear in her eyes. She looked hopeful and vulnerable and beautiful in a way that made my chest ache. We were standing so close I could see the tears clinging to her eyelashes, could hear the slight hitch in her breathing. Are you sure? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Because if you're just saying this because you feel bad for me, or because you're caught up in the moment, I need you to tell me now. I can't handle you changing your mind later. I shook my head. I'm not saying this because I feel bad. I'm saying this because it's true. I'm in love with you, Rachel. I think I have been for a long time. I was just too scared and too stupid to admit it. She searched my face like she was looking for any sign that I might be lying. You really mean that? Yes, I said, and the word felt like the truest thing I'd ever said. I really mean that. Rachel let out a shaky breath, and then she started laughing through her tears. This is insane. This whole situation is completely insane. I couldn't help but smile. Yeah, it really is. We're standing in a conference room at 8 o'clock at night, surrounded by a disaster of a presentation, and we just accidentally confessed our feelings for each other because you made a stupid joke about marriage. When you put it that way, it sounds even crazier, I admitted. She wiped at her eyes, still laughing. How did we get here? How did neither of us figure this out sooner? Because we're both idiots, I said. Really intelligent idiots who are terrible at understanding our own feelings. Rachel nodded, still smiling through her tears. That sounds about right. We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. The air between us felt different now, charged with something new but also familiar. This was still Rachel, the same person I'd known for 3 years. But also, this was Rachel, the woman I was in love with, and I was finally letting myself see her that way. So what happens now? She asked quietly. I reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, and took her hand. Her fingers immediately laced through mine like they'd been designed to fit together. I guess we figure it out together, I said. Like we always do. She squeezed my hand. But what about work? We work together. We sit near each other. Everyone knows we're friends. This could get complicated. It probably will get complicated, I agreed. We'll have to talk to HR. We'll have to be professional during work hours. People will probably gossip. But I don't care about any of that. Do you? Rachel thought about it for a second, then shook her head. No. I don't care either. I've spent 2 years caring too much about what might happen and what could go wrong. I'm tired of being careful. Good, I said, because I'm done being careful too. She looked at me with those eyes that I'd seen 1,000 times before but was now seeing in a completely new way. Can I ask you something? Anything. When you made that joke about marrying me, was any part of you being serious? Even a tiny part? I thought about it, really thought about it. Yeah, I said honestly. I think deep down some part of me was. I think that's why the joke came out so easily. It wasn't just random. It was me finally saying what I've wanted to say for a while now but didn't have the courage to admit. Rachel's smile grew wider. So you really did kind of propose to me? I guess I did, I said laughing. In the worst possible way, in the worst possible location, with absolutely no planning whatsoever. I don't know, she said, stepping closer to me. I think it's kind of perfect. Various. Before I could respond, she leaned up and kissed me. It was soft and gentle and a little hesitant, like we were both testing whether this was really okay, whether this was really happening. But then I kissed her back, and it stopped being hesitant and started being the most natural thing in the world. It felt like every conversation we'd ever had, every laugh we'd shared, every moment we'd spent together had been leading to this. When we finally pulled apart, we were both smiling like complete fools. "Wow," Rachel said. "Yeah," I agreed. "Wow." We stood there in the conference room, still holding hands, surrounded by the remains of our abandoned presentation. "We never finished the slides," Rachel said suddenly, looking around at the mess. "I honestly don't care about the presentation anymore," I said. She laughed. "We're going to care tomorrow morning when we have to present to the clients. Future us can worry about that. Right now, I just want to be here with you." Rachel leaned her head against my shoulder. "Okay, future US can deal with the work stuff." We stayed like that for a while, just holding each other in the quiet office. Eventually, Rachel pulled back and looked up at me. "So are we really doing this? Are we really together now?" "If you want to be," I said. "I've wanted to be for 2 years," she reminded me. "I think I've made that pretty clear." "Then yeah," I said. "We're really doing this." She grinned. "My mom is going to freak out. I've been telling her about you for years, and she kept asking why we weren't dating." "Your mom knew before we did?"